Okay, just a moment. Let's wait for people to log in.
Yes.
Takes a little less than a minute, I think, then we can start.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. We're about to start, so take your virtual seat. Today's presenters are already on the starting blocks. Okay. I would say let's get started. So hello everyone, and welcome to this Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm a content strategist here at Gala. And today presenters are from the team of One Stop Asia. We have Gargana Tolieva, Head of Marketing, and Rosen Ivanov, Account Manager in the European Product Department. It's the very first time presenting at Gala, so let's give them a warm welcome. Write something in the chat to welcome them. In the meantime, just let me remind you, before we get started, at any time during the webinar, you can use the QA box to submit your questions, and we'll have a QA at the end. This webinar will be recorded, so there's going to be a follow-up email after the event. And you will find the recording also published on the Gala website by Monday next week. So without any further ado, Gargana and Rosen, I'm gonna leave the floor to you guys.
Thank you very much, Isabella. As you heard from Isabella, my name is Gargana, and today with me is my colleague Rosen. I'm head of our marketing department at One Stop Asia, and Rosen is account manager in our European team. And we are very glad to have you here, and we'd like to say a warm welcome to you as well. Thank you very much for signing up for our webinar. And without too many introductions, I'm going to jump straight to the topic that we are going to cover. And we are going to talk about Asian languages in a bit of a different point of view, because sometimes what we need when we talk with our clients and the people that we work with, usually Asian languages might be quite intimidating for people who work with them, especially when they are not familiar with their specific. And this fact alone can actually be a very good reason for a company to decide not to add them to their portfolio. And just a second to go on my first slide. And the first thing that we are going to talk about, it's very brief, something like a short summary on Asian languages translation. And the thing with Asian languages is that sometimes they might be a bit peculiar to translate, but from our daily practice, we have designated maybe one very useful way for us to work with them. And we separate them into groups that actually in the way they are written, because they're one of the things that makes them different from other languages sometimes is their writing form. And we separate them on languages that are using characters and or ideographs, languages that use abugidus, and languages that at some point during their evolvement they've adopted the Latin alphabet. And the next very brief point that I'm going to make is, and I'm going to talk about, is what makes them very different from other languages to translate. And probably some of you already know this, but we cannot skip it before we go to the main question. And what from our practice, we think that diversity, honorifics, and the cultural differences are the 3 points which make them special to some extent when we talk about Asian languages translation. And here comes the big question of today's topic. And it is that from a point of view of a company that wants to approach Asian languages, do you or the people that work with you need to speak Chinese language in order to process it professionally? And for me, the answer of this thing is no. And I'm going to try and talk to you how to go about this thing. In reality, in our experience at One Stop Asia, the most important thing when we work with Asian languages is the understanding about them. But understanding not the very language or what they are talking to us. It's mostly about their what lies behind the language, what lies behind the things that people who know them talk to you, and also how to navigate around them. And the thing is that if you understand these small differences, they will have a very big influence over the way you approach them and the way you actually build your expectations when you are talking to your own clients. And what we actually want to share is actually that LSP, like for a company that is a language service provider working with other translation companies, for us, it's more important to show you the differences and for you to plan ahead rather than to just explain, do this and do that and do this. This way you can anticipate what can go either go wrong or be an issue and plan better. And without too many details on this, I'm going to jump straight to the content that we are going to talk about. And the first one is quoting Asian languages. The second one is just a bit of desktop publishing and why it matters for Asian languages. And the third one is our point of view on marketing and offering Asian languages as an LSP, working with other LSPs. In going straight to quotations and what's different about them. Most of us know that Asian languages have different structures. They also have different mechanics when it's about talking, when it's compared to Western languages. And this sometimes leads to issues. And whether they are issues with operation of cat tools, whether they are different in preparing quotations, whether it's the source language, whether it's the target language. And one of the other things that can jump out is actually that most of the Asian languages, they depend heavily on the target audience. So the translation changes with the target audience. And the first problem, or not a problem, but mainly a point that we want to tackle is word count. And to be precise, it's not exactly word count most of the time because they are written in different ways, some in Latin letters, some with character words. And what can go wrong? There is plenty of things that you've already stumbled about, and we are just going to outline them. But when a quotation is prepared for the majority of languages, usually the final cost is calculated based on the source words. For a lot of Asian languages, and in a lot of countries there, usually you would see sometimes a quote in target characters. But it's not only this. What this means for you and respectively for your client is that sometimes you might not know the final price until the work is done. And this can lead to anxiety in your clients. And that may decide, and they may decide they don't want to work with it in general, or they don't want to go for such a project. Another, if I can say, peculiarity is for translations concerning Asian languages. When they are translated into European languages, you can ask your vendor to charge per source language, and they will charge you per character instead of per word. And this is also a potential source of problem because if, for example, they give you the price per word or per character, and then you get the word count in the wrong way just because you don't have the MS Word character count, differences can come up, and you will not notice until you receive the final bill for the translation. Another potential problem that can actually jump out is, for example, even if you get the character counter, then at the end, your vendor or your trusted partner gives you a different higher estimation. And the reasons for this are many. And we tried to outline just a few. One of them is very well known, and this is because of their writing system. It's just because they are written in a different way, and that's pretty much valid for the most popular languages that we translate, let's say Chinese, Japanese, Korean, or Thai and Hindi. The other reason that is not so obvious and it's not so well known is actually the lack of digital copies for the documents that were translated in the past. And this leads to some, let's say, not so convenient practices in current time that have stayed in time. This is mainly because the digitalization for Asian languages happened about 10 years ago. And this is about the time when operating systems actually started handling Unicode without any additional tools. So what happened is that it was very time consuming to provide the proper word count in a quote based on it. So as an outcome of this, stays the practice for translation agencies to charge you per target word rather than per source character. One more option that lies behind the reason why you can, for example, have a target character quote is what you see on my screen at the moment, and this is a stationary. And I didn't know this word and this table before I actually started working with Asian languages. And it's very hard to dig a lot of information about it. But what this is actually a table with a very well-known number of boxes. And usually in the past, when people started to translate, they would actually add the characters into the boxes. And at the end, instead of counting characters or words, they are just counting the number of pages. And one thing that stayed from this practice is actually that sometimes local agencies will add into the quote these spaces between the characters. And this will actually put up the volume a bit higher than what you would anticipate. And based on all these things, we have a small recommendation to make here. And usually it's better to discuss this first with your vendor and be on the same page. And also charge your clients the same way the quotation has been given to you. This way you will avoid any discrepancies in the calculation and also in the final outcome of the project. And one more thing is that you can always go to your vendor and ask them to provide you an already calculated quote rather than just the price per word or per character. And this will make sure that you are actually on the same page when it comes to the final price of the project. On this slide, we have actually tried to tackle the second big point when we are talking about translation, and this is the turnaround time. And usually straightforward, we say we are going to give you a day and everything, but there are a few things that affect Asian languages more than others. And some of them are well known, like, for example, the resources and availability and their diversity, because it's clear that if we actually don't have enough resources, or it's a very peculiar topic with a very niche language, then it's actually going to be more time. But also you have to consider time differences. And this also considers resources, because the big value of resources, of good quality resources, is being translators are actually located in the place, and they are native speakers to the country where they translate for. And this leads to a different time zone. So sometimes when we have to confirm a project with a translator, for example, and it's very specific, it's gonna take us an overnight to do that. And that's something that you have to consider in time and when planning with your clients. The three other points that we've actually collected are the formatting and QC, which is not something that usually you would take as time taking, but sometimes with certain Asian languages, you need to have preliminary preparation or QC at the end, which can take more time than anticipated. And the other two might seem a bit off key for modern Western world, but internet speed in Asian countries, along with blocked websites, are a very common issue. And sometimes you may find that the translators or the people that work there would need an enormous amount of time just to download the project, or to just reach a website where they have to read reference materials, and also delivery. It's pretty much the same. So this affects the delivery and the turnaround time of a project. And you need to have these things in mind in order to actually plan better for your clients. And here our advice is very simple, and that's basically what we've designated so far as a good practice, that it's wise to consider capacity of about 1,500 words per day when it comes to most of Asian languages. Of course, this is, it depends pretty much on any other thing that you have to negotiate, but this is a baseline which you can follow with this. The next thing I'm going to talk about is support materials. But when it comes to support materials, I'm not going to just outline them. And I'm just going to point into the second and the third one, because the others are pretty much standard. And I want to point out the target market and target audience importance for Asian languages, because most of the Asian languages, for example, Japanese, changes in time. And if the translators don't live in the country for a year, the language that they are going to use, it's going to be outdated. And it's going to be, for example, seen in the translation, in the language that they use. So a person who lives in Japan would recognize that. And I've taken an example with Vietnamese language. And if you want to use files for the Vietnamese immigration community in the USA, you need to consider the target group for sure, because mainstream Vietnamese is not the same as the Vietnamese language that is spoken among the Vietnamese immigrants in the United States. And if you don't consider this, sometimes you may get the feedback that the vocabulary, it's a bit different and it's not matching the expectations. My next slide, actually, it's just something that we've compiled with the idea that it's going to be helpful, and you will have it in the presentation for later if you want to download. It's just a list of recommendations which you can follow in order to process better Asian languages. And with this, it's very short, but I want you to think about it and write some notes, maybe, whether you have a question. If I've actually convinced you that you don't need to speak Chinese in order to take a project about it. And here is the spot that I'm going to pass the mic to Rosen, who is actually going to give you a few live examples that we've just chosen from our practice and from our daily routine. So Rosen, please.
Thank you, Gary. Hello to everyone, and I hope that you guys can hear me well. So I'm going to share today a few examples with you. And the first one I'm going to start with is that we have received a query email regarding a quote for a large translation project by one of our clients' PMs. And we have asked all the questions that we needed in order for us to provide him with an accurate quote. And after everything was clear for us, we did provide them with the quote and the turnaround for the project. Now, bear in mind that one of the questions that we asked was if there was a specific budget for this project, and the answer that we have received was no, you should quote by your standard pricing, and that's what we did. And 3 days after, of course, we follow up on this to see if this project will start, because we had to schedule our resources properly. And we got a reply that the end client actually canceled the project 2 days ago because the budget was high for them. So as you can see, this situation could have been potentially prevented if we were informed about this, as depending on the projects, sometimes we're willing to provide a discount from our standard rates in the name, of course, of the healthy relationship that we have with our clients. And the second example I'm going to share is that, again, we received a query email for translation of a file, but the file looked like it was going to be used for marketing purposes. It's because when we checked the file, it was actually a brochure with pictures, and we asked the person who contacted us if the file will require desktop publishing, and he had no idea what that was. So after several back and forward emails, we explained to him what that was, and so he contacted his end client to see if this service will actually be required. And so at the end, it turned out that not only that the end client will require the DTP service, but by having us do this for them, we were going to save them money as well as time, because the original idea was that they're going to use one company for the translation part and another company for the DTP part. So both of these examples are showing how communication is very important. It's actually the key to starting a project, and both show that in one case, because of bad communication, we wouldn't start the project, and in the other one, not only that we did it, but we exceeded the client's expectations. So have that in mind as well. And those are the examples that I wanted to share. And Gary, back to you.
So back to me. As you may guess, after Rosen's explanation about the desktop publishing, I'm just gonna go a little bit deeper into a desktop publishing service. And why we decided to talk about this is that I have a very interesting real life example straight from our few months back. And the thing is that in our content strategy, we strongly develop content towards formatic and fonts in Asian languages, desktop publishing, and so on. And a person reached out to us directly from our marketing channels with a request for advice. And his case was like that he was going to hold a very important presentation in China at a very big conference. And upon submitting his documentation, he was actually given a hint from his Chinese colleagues that the documentation needed more work to be done. And the documentation was translated into Chinese simplified, and a designer who is not Asian, let's say not Chinese, made the excellent design. However, there was one single very small thing that actually didn't resonate with the Chinese audience. And the tiny thing was actually that the presentation lacked the proper fonts, and it was also lacking some correct usage of spaces, line breaking, and some English names were not fitting the expectation of the Chinese audience. So what we did was, it's like obvious solution was to choose some fonts that are suitable for Chinese simplified, and then perform desktop publishing for the whole documentation. And this actually solved his problem, and he was very thankful to us after reaching out to us through content that he found on our websites. And with regards to this, I'm making a bit of an explanation, because desktop publishing is a very common service when it comes to, let's say, marketing materials or others. But with Asian languages, this is much more important, because the way they are written and their culture and the way Asian people express themselves, it very much relies and resonates with the designs that they create in their whole culture. Never mind whether it's websites in Chinese, whether it's if you just look at Yahoo Japan and Yahoo that we use, they are pretty much different. Or if you go in Korea and you see Naver, it doesn't have anything in common with our own Google, for example, and it's very different. And this is because of the way they perceive the world around them. And that makes it almost not obligatory, but very good to advise with the people who work on daily basis with Asian languages, whether you will need desktop publishing for the documents that you are preparing. And with regards to this, I've just pinpointed 3 small facts about different languages, like the most common, of course, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, of how different the whole way it operates is. And for example, for Chinese, the weight order for Chinese actually is completely opposite of English. And the Chinese fonts would usually start from heavy to light, while it's exactly the opposite way in English. And it implies different things in a way. And it's the same for Korean language when it comes to weight order. For Japanese, for example, you don't even have an italic in the fonts that they have to use. It's because of the way Japanese is written. And an important, really small detail about Korean language is the difference between quotation marks. And for example, for South Korean are used English style quotation marks, and you are using French style quotation marks for North Korea. And this can actually change the way a document is targeted to some extent. So our advice here is that if you are not sure that it's like your document is ready, just ask and then recommend to your client. If you take the initiative just to advise them and to talk about it and to discuss whether they need it or it's something, this can be helpful. And you can discuss it with your vendor as well, and they will be able to recommend most of the things that you have to watch out for or add at the end of the service. My next topic is a bit off considering the rest of the content for today, but this is on purpose. And we wanted to show you exactly where actually we are located in the translation industry, and at the same time explain the purpose of sharing experience for us, because this is something that we really would like to do when we are concentrated on doing it in the last 3 years. When it comes to the translation industry, it has many different layers. And I'd usually imagine it as an hourglass. And at the one side of the hourglass are the end clients and the big market where like anything can go anywhere. And you can have automotive industry going into Asia, and that's good for translating. And you can actually have government projects going from Asia towards United States, and that's okay. And there are limitless possibilities when it comes to offering translation to these kind of, we call them end clients. The next step is actually the companies that work with these end clients, and they are highly professional. They are huge with regards to their revenues and the teams that manage them, just because they have to work with end clients, and this needs lots of human resource in order to provide customer service and everything. And then you have a small how can I say, probably group of companies that are actually translation companies working with translation companies. And below them, and it's not below, but it's just further down the chain, you have smaller language service providers. And at the end, you have a huge amount of companies that are small, single language providers, freelancers, and everything. And this is the pool that we reach out usually. And if we want to talk about positioning, then take the translation companies working for translation companies, then add the Asian languages in it as target group. And this is what we actually is where we are positioned in the translation companies. And it's a very specific and difficult market to target. And the thing about targeting is actually sharing. In the next few slides that I'm actually showing off, they are more like where we've been and how we reached the decision to share and to show up knowledge, rather than to just go there and make huge, how can I say, slogans that we are the best and so on. So we started from scratch, nearly scratch, 3 years ago, and most of our lead generation was word of mouth, which wasn't enough at that time anymore. So we had to work a bit more until we find our way around. And we did like everything according to the book, and we improved our brand and so on and so on. And this data is more leading me to this bit here at the end, that from our experience, what truly matters is that if our own partners are able to understand and to sell more effectively, this would eventually lead to more work for us. Because if they know and they're not afraid to approach Asian languages, this is the way it works for us. So the statistic data is just for confirming the strategy that I'm going to show you at the end. And what we chose to work with is very strong content building. And this is what we were doing for 3 years. Researching, building content, thinking about it, how to approach it, and what it's gonna solve the problem of our potential partners and how they are going to actually recognize us as such. And with regards to this, we did lots of content. And Gala, for example, is one of the partners that we are actually working with in the last maybe more than 6-7 months already. And very recently, we took an enormous effort for about 2 years to create a book on Asian languages. But as seen in the translation industry, it's not a standard book for translation. And with this, I'm going to actually finalize my presentation on marketing. But there is one single thing that I'd like to point out, and that for us, all this talk about marketing is that basically because we'd like to share knowledge, and because we think that by sharing knowledge and sharing with our experience with our partners or future partners, it builds stronger partnerships. And this actually leads to better success for all of us. And that's all for me. And if you have any questions, Isabella is going to give them to us.
Thank you, Gergana. Yes, let's wait for a second, see whether people have questions. You can type your questions in the Q&A box, but you can also type it in the chat. I think I can manage to multitask with two boxes at the same time. But first of all, thank you, Gergana and Rosen, for presenting at Gala. I actually have a couple of questions. While you were talking, I wrote them down. The first one is, you were talking about the challenges of working with people in Asian countries, like that they need a lot of time sometimes because the internet speed to download all the files, etc. So the delivery times are not the usual that we used to, let's put it this way. So what about cases when you have, let's say, a huge volume for translation and you have a very limited time, like, I don't know, I'm thinking 100,000 words in a very limited period. How would you deal with that? Or how One Stop Asia usually deals with that?
Well, I'm gonna take this one. So
Sure.
thank you for the questions. So in general, we have quite a good experience with handling large volumes. And what you said as an example, it's doable, but the way it needs to work with us is that we're gonna use more than one translator, and then we're gonna have one reviewer. So let's say we're gonna use 2 or 3 translators working at the same time, and then we're gonna have one reviewer, which will provide the same style and also consistency of the translation at the end, so we can have a nice, clean product. And of course, we had cases where we had to translate a lot larger volumes. So we're talking about let's say 500,000 words or 2 million words. And in these cases, we use a lot more linguists. So it can be like 20 or 30 people working. And of course, but for projects like that, we need to have at least a couple of weeks in order for us to schedule resources and to have a proper and smooth workflow prepared upfront. Another technique that we use if the deadline is very tight is if we have several translators working and each of them have like 5 or 6 different files that they need to translate, then we tell them to have a staggered deliveries. So once they finish with one file, to send it directly to the reviewer. And this allows us to have the translators and the reviewer working simultaneously at the same time, so we can save some of the time and meet the tight deadlines.
Yeah, great tips. Thank you, Rosen. There are 2 questions, actually 3, they're on the same topic. So I'm gonna read them all to you. So the first 2 are from Mary J. McCullough. And she says 99% of our projects are from English into Asian languages. So would it be best for us to quote based on English word count? And the follow-up to her question is, what is the best way to get a word count of Asian languages? Who wants to take it?
I'll do it. So in regards to the first question, I think it's in the chat, as I can see it as well. So yes, if you're quoting English to Asian, the best way would be to quote by the English word count. in regards to the second question, which was what is the best way to get the word count of the Asian languages? We actually don't prefer to do it like that, simply because when we're translating from Asian to English, we prefer to count characters. And the reason for that is because some of the gap tools that we're using to not count word count of an Asian language properly. I'm going to give you example with the Thai language, for example, where in Thai language, we don't have spaces between the words. So if you open a file with Thai, you're going to see just very, very long words. But in general, those are not words, those are sentences. And the cat tool will make a mistake and it's going to count, let's say, 100 words. But in reality, that can be 1,000 characters. So it's very misleading sometimes to count the Asian languages by the word. And we personally prefer to do it by characters. So we're very accurate with what we're working with.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So the follow-up was also from Florencia, because we always discuss English into Asian languages and Asian languages into English. But what about, she says, what is the best way to manage a quotation from, let's say, an Asian language into something like Spanish, or in my case, I would say Italian? Would you apply the same principle that you just explained, or are there any other things to look out for?
No, we will basically apply the same principle. We're going to count the character count of the Asian language, because regardless if you're translating it into English, Spanish, Portuguese, German, or whatever, the character count is going to say that it's going to be the same. So it's going to give you an idea of what we're working with. Now, the price, of course, is going to be different depending on the target language.
Okay, thank you. There's another one from Kyle. I'm going to read it, but it's going to be difficult for me because there are some, I think it's Japanese words. So Kyle, maybe, let's see. Let's see if I can do this. If you want, Kyle, I can open your microphone and you can talk directly with Rose and Gagana, or go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Hi, Kyle.
Hi. Yeah, so I just had a follow-up question to one of your answers earlier about quoting based on the character count for Asian languages. So
Right.
For Japanese, you have some variation sometimes in whether it contracts or expands, since it has multiple alphabets. So kanji, like the Chinese-based characters, it tends to contract, but in foreign loanwords are often written in the katakana alphabet, which can often lead to a lot of expansion. So the example that I gave was the English loanword internet community becomes interneto community, which is, I don't know even how many characters that is, but like at least 10 or 12.
12, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, like what are your thoughts on that? Because you might not get the most, I feel like you might not get the most accurate quote because of like the variability in which alphabets are used and the context.
Well, yeah, that is true. And here we need to look at the things at a little bit different. So what you're saying is true. Of course, sometimes you're going to get more of a target language, and sometimes you're going to get less. So this is more connected to the volume ratio that we get from translating Asian to English language. So for example, you said Japanese, so I'm going to use that one as an example. Most of the time in the practice that we have, and we have examined many projects that we had, is that once you translate from Japanese to English, roughly most of the time you're going to get a ratio of 2:1. So it's going to be, if you have 1,000 characters, you're going to have 500 English target words. Now, I'm saying that most of the time because it's not an exact science, as you said, it's all about what's the actual content. And in some cases, instead of getting 500 words, you're going to get 620. And then in another case, you're going to get 470 words. So sometimes it's going to be a little bit above, and sometimes it's going to be a little bit below. And this is why it's always balanced to go by the character count. I hope this managed to answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Okay, there's one last question. I think you kind of answered it during your presentation, but would you recommend a specific tool to count characters for Asian languages? Apart from the wonderful stationery that Gergana showed that I want to buy simply because I like it.
Okay, so there are many cat tools that can count Asian characters. And if you work with different, they're always going to show you a different number. But what we've seen from the practice is, for example, that the one which is getting pretty close to the correct character count is always MemoQ, because it gives a very good count. It separates symbols which are not characters, so like exclamation marks, spaces between words, numbers, and all this. Most of the cat tools, they're counting that as a character, but in reality it's not. So MemoQ has a program which is reading the text and is separating all these on the side, and it's actually counting only the characters. And that's why, for example, I personally prefer to use it, but of course, we have clients with preferences which are saying strictly use Trados Studio, and then we just go with it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see whether there are other questions. I think we've answered everything for now. In any case, if anyone in the audience has other specific questions, they can always reach out to you guys. Maybe you want to give your emails. I don't know if you want to type them in the chat box or show the slide. I think the slide deck will be shared together with the recording. Is that correct? Yes. So you'll find also the QR code that Gergana showed at the beginning of her presentation to download the guidelines that the team has put together. So Gergana and Rosen, thank you very much once more for the presentation. It was wonderful to have you. You should come back again. And I see that there are some very positive comments coming in the chat. So thank you. Thank you to all attendees for being here and listening and participating. When I close the webinar, on your screen, you'll see a post-webinar survey. I would like to ask you to take 30 seconds, I promise, not more, to give us your feedback on the presentation, on the speakers, but most importantly, let us know what topics are of interest to you, and also whether you would be interested to do what Gergana and Rosen have done today, and that is present a gala webinar. The next webinar will be next week, and it will be about mentorship in the localization industry, and it will be presented by the Beluga team. So until then, thank you everyone. Have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
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 Bye.